Welcome here from the Austrian Press Club Concordia. I'm here in the English pre-briefing talking about why Austria should join NATO. And obviously I've already collected 6,500 signatures. I'm now promoting also for 2024 to join NATO already. This is the way forward. And I call this why it's important, because we need, of course, to complete our Western integration. 30 years ago, we got into the European Union next year. 70 years ago, we got our independence, but always under the umbrella of the big powers. Austria was never a fully sovereign nation because we were always under this state treaty neutrality yoke, and we have to free ourselves. We did that with EU membership. That's, by the way, nothing, because Orban is claiming that this would be the new Soviet Union. That's really be very serious here. Here we are the union of the free people, and of course NATO is the defense organization of the free Europe and of the West, and we need to join that in order to be fully sovereign nation. And this is our choice. And if we cannot join NATO, we are not fully sovereign, because we cannot decide about our defense alliances ourselves. We have to ask Moscow, according to some. And my big hero, Alois Mock, he was very clear in '93 that Moscow is not a successor state in the state treaty. We can join if we want. We just have to, this self-imposed restriction of neutrality, which we ourselves have imposed ourselves on the request of the Soviet Union in 1955. We have to have a four-party decision of the Social Democrats, Christian Democrats, of the Conservatives and of the Liberals together to abandon, cancel neutrality. And it's not the highest good in the state, the highest principle of the state. It's an imposed, and actually not only self-imposed, but ultimately Stalin-imposed and Soviet-imposed restriction on our sovereignty, which we have to end now. And this is exactly my message, what I'm calling everybody for. I will go through all the discussion points here in this presentation. I will also say that basically in Austria, the so-called Zeitenwende is basically completely disaster. We have not completed it in no aspect, neither in trade policy, nor in enlargement politics, nor in energy politics, nor in military politics in terms of supplying Ukraine, and not in the question of Schengen enlargement. And all these things are deeply problematic. We are basically stuck in a pre-2022 world, with the addition that Mr. Orban is trying to dominate our Austrian politics, same as it does in Croatia, in Slovakia, in Romania. And this is also deeply disturbing. Ahead of the 2024 election year, with national elections and with European elections, and also this very critical war winter, where I hope there will be a decisive breakthrough on the southern front for the Ukrainians. Slava Ukraina, I fully support them, but of course it will be very difficult for them, for all of us. It will be a lot of negative additional surprises prepared by Putin against the Free West, and we will be in this clearly very problematic next 3 months, probably the most difficult ones. And as I have already predicted, it is very clear that we will go into a very difficult transition in Russia and in Serbia in 2024. And of course the catalyst here is the victory of Ukraine. But we have to, in this very difficult phase where we are entering now, we have to protect our allies. Ukraine, Bosnia, Kosovo and Austria must be a role model here by joining NATO. And here, this is the logic of it all. So that's why from the beginning I have not just discussed about Austrian NATO membership, but always in the context of also Bosnia, Kosovo and Ukraine joining NATO. And that's of course the direction I'm going, and also of course in the question that we need here also that Ireland, Malta, the European Union, that will be my campaign next year, that the European Union is joining NATO. And of course I had some considerable successes. I wanna in this short review also talk about it, especially in the Austrian media. It was very, very good. And there was in the Salzburger Nachrichten a big text. There was also a very nice review in Austrian Wings about my stand on the Heldenplatz, where I put the NATO flag in front of the Austrian governmental tribune on the most holy day of neutrality. That was very, very good. I was very happy about that event. It took only 5 minutes. Then the military police asked me kindly to remove the NATO flag from the Heldenplatz, but it was there and it was very remarkable. Also, we have seen that now my international activities have led to a massive increase in my Twitter following. I'm now at 54,700 actually from today, and that's also quite good. I'm much more seriously taken by our enemies. They know exactly that what I do is very dangerous for them, and I have been now honored to be mentioned by the speeches of President Vucic and President Dodik, and also in the Russian state TV they have devoted, actually under the not very flattering statement of the Austrian psychopath, they have devoted 1 hour primetime TV time to me. That's unfortunately not the same case in Austria, but of course I would not fancy to be called psychopath in the Austrian television. Anyhow, this was quite remarkable, and now we will see also the confrontation, what I always call for a Srbomaidan in Serbia. You have seen how Bosnia is acting, and the times with these 40,000 Bosnian Serbs going into Belgrade to vote to save Belgrade for Vucic. That's of course a big scandal, and I'm very clearly calling for deterrence, for strength. Our enemies have to be afraid of us and not feel they can basically dominate us or that bully us into submission. I made it very clear on these occasions that potentially in case of war, we, that means NATO, that means the Americans, ultimately have also to refer to the use of violence and to use bombs on Banja Luka and on Belgrade in case they start a new war, which is very likely at the beginning of next year, and we have to be very careful on that one. So that was 3 major activities and results also in my name mentioned in the speech of the Banska terror by Mr. Vucic, and also Mr. Dodik was reacting to my threat on bombing Banja Luka's governmental building, always with pre-warning. I'm actually a peace activist, let's make that very clear. And they were not very happy, but they at least took notice of these activities. As you already know, I'm very active here in the Austrian media with op-eds, and I have made the case for Ukraine's membership in the EU and NATO. The EU thing, I actually have now been vindicated because the EU has decided to open the negotiations. There is also a big budget for Ukraine pending. In the US, I call for that, and also in the EU. And I definitely support that, and I have called for 1.5 trillion for the Ukraine's victory, and that we are now much less money to be spent, but of course, you know, that's the 1.5 trillion I have called included not only the help for Ukraine, but also the European rearmament, and of course the integration of Ukraine, and if you count everything together, and of course the costs of the shock absorbing the economic war which Russia is waging against us. Ultimately, my most important argument for Austrian membership is simply solidarity and responsibility. Why should always the Slovaks, Romanians, Bulgarians, Poles and Ukrainians defend Austrians? Austria is a normal sovereign nation with the limitation of the state treaty and neutrality, but we have to also carry our defense ourselves. And we are not doing it now for decades, always under this auspices that Russia should not be provoked. And therefore we don't defend ourselves, but the Polish do, but the Romanians have to, and Austria not, but we increase the pensions. I mean, please, and we have still, even Kosovo is now spending 2% of its GDP on defense, and Austria not. That's really very, very sad, yeah. There were several media appearances in the framework of the first phase of the campaign, and I hope, and I actually will continue for the next phase anyhow, but I will make it very clear that here are the 12 reasons. I'm not sure they can be easily read, the 12 reasons why Austria should join NATO. Obviously, always, you know, Austria will be more secure, and we contribute to our security ourselves. then of course it's moral, it's necessary for the reform of our institutions, the Austrian army, the Austrian Secret Service. It's solidarity in the European Union and the EU to be in NATO, because NATO is about free Europe. Then it's totally normal to be in the EU and to be in NATO, because everybody is. Just Austrian exemptionism in Central Europe, it cannot be explained, together with Serbia and some few ex-British island colonies on the periphery. This is really very wrong. And of course, NATO membership of the EU is the next logical step towards unification of the European Union, and to be taken serious by the United States of America, and to achieve the United States of Europe, which must be our aim. And this is, of course, the ability to join a defense alliance is the sign of statehood. And this we need to achieve, also on the European level. Then, of course, NATO is anchoring the US very much forever in the EU, in the Europe, in the security of Europe, and that's so indecisive when it comes into the question of our security and our freedom, because without the US, no free Europe, because the Russians would be taking the East and dominating us economically in the center and in the West, as they have tried very much now under Putin. But with the US we can contain them and ultimately defeat them. Yes, there is, of course, NATO means the security of Kosovo and Bosnia, the two countries we have liberated out of the Serbian succession wars, the Yugoslavian succession wars, and of course Austria is always abused as a role model for neutral Serbia joining the EU without NATO, because they really hate NATO there, and they are with Russia, and they have shown that very much in this war. And of course the Austrian neutrality is very negative for the pro-NATO Balkans, and so we need to change that. Then, of course, most important is my text always here, my call for NATO, for Austria to deliver weapons to Ukraine. This is completely minimal what we are doing, you know, some money, some assistance, some support, but in reality what we need to is to send weapons, tanks, artillery, shells. Austria needs to send that. Austria has then blocking capacity now, neutral Austria, by repairing our tanks, upgrading in them for a tank battle, which will never happen, while we could send these 50 tanks we have to Ukraine, keep some for training, and buy some new ones later when we need them after victory. And that's the much better strategy. And of course, not to buy artillery shells for us, but for Ukraine, because the Russians must be defeated now and must be contained forever. So then we have to also fight the Austrian anti-Americanism, which is basically rooted in a not very successful denazification of Austria after the Second World War. And of course this deep-seated kind of revenge feeling that the Americans have defeated us in World War II. And of course this very pro-Sovietic kind of left-wing propaganda, which many tend to believe in Austria. And it's a big problem, this anti-Americanism, pro-Sovietism, and this kind of hate of the West mixed with protectionism, anti-Semitism, and this xenophobic feeling. And this is the Austrian consensus, and it's very shocking, you know, it's everything I hate is expressed in this anti-NATO sentiment, which many Austrians do have. And then of course we have massive Russian influence in Austria, obviously influenced by since Putin's rise to power. He loves Austria, and he is obviously very active with this kind of myth of the bridge, you know, that's always a complete disaster. And we should never use that. Again, we are not a bridge to anywhere. We are just a European member state and a future NATO member state. And that should be also our new narrative for developing a new state identity to explain our population what is the situation, because it should be a European narrative. And this kind of exceptionalism, this which Austrian exceptionalism based on neutrality, that we are more for peace than the Germans, that we are better people because we are not in NATO, we are neutral, we have a special way to peace, a special way to the dictatorships of Iran, North Korea, Russia, and we have this special role in the world. It's all a fake history, it's all a completely wrong assumption. We are just a normal European member state, and we should fall in line with the US and American policy on the main things, because they know a bit better than in Vienna what to do. Because if you look back at the consequential success of the Austrian foreign policy in the last 200 years, I cannot see it. Yes, and this kind of Austrian exceptionalism is based on neutrality and based on arrogance of the Viennese elites, and that's of course really very, very negative for our country and leads to a lot of collusion, corruption, complicity with Russian and Iranian dictatorships, laundering money, committing crimes in Austria unpunished, and so on and so on. Ultimately, our neutrality is immoral and without against European solidarity, and it's irresponsible, and it must end now. Please sign the Austrian People's Petition for Austria to join NATO, and please let us cancel the neutrality in the beginning of 2024 as fast as we can. Thanks a lot for listening. More to come. Next video will be in German language during my press briefing. Bye.